Look at your hands, not at what they can do, not at what they are holding, at the marks on them, the small scars, the calluses, the evidence of things that happened that you did not plan for and could not control. Now ask yourself honestly, what do those marks mean to you? For most men, the answer is some version of the same thing. Evidence of failure. Proof of the times things went wrong. Reminders of the moments they broke, fell, stumbled, or were broken by something outside themselves. The divorce that shattered the identity he had built around being a husband. The business that collapsed after 3 years of everything he had. The friendship that ended in a way that still does not make complete sense. The version of himself he had to bury, because life made it impossible for that version to survive. Most men carry these breaks quietly. They do not talk about them. They manage them. They build a life around them that looks, from the outside, like a man who has moved on, and from the inside, feels like a man who has learned to function with damage that was never properly addressed. Now let me tell you about a ceramic bowl. In 15th century Japan, the shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa broke his favorite tea bowl. He sent it to China to be repaired. When it came back, it was held together with ugly metal staples, functional but visually wrong, a repair that announced itself as damage. Dissatisfied, Yoshimasa asked Japanese craftsmen to find a better way. What they developed changed the philosophy of repair forever. Instead of hiding the cracks, instead of filling them with something designed to disappear, they filled them with lacquer mixed with gold. The breaks did not vanish. They became visible, deliberate, beautiful. The cracks did not diminish the bowl. They became the most striking thing about it. The bowl was not restored to what it had been before it broke. It became something that could only exist because it had broken. The Japanese called this practice Kintsugi, golden joinery, the art of repairing with gold, and the philosophy behind it, the worldview it expresses about damage, repair, imperfection, and the specific beauty that only broken things can carry, is the most important thing I have ever found for a man trying to understand what to do with the parts of himself that did not survive intact. Stay with me. Chapter 1. The philosophy behind the gold. Before we go deeper, let us understand what Kintsugi actually says as a philosophy, because it is not simply an art technique. It is a complete statement about the nature of value, beauty, and what it means for a thing, or a man, to have a history. The Western approach to damage is almost universally the same. Hide it. Fix it so that it cannot be seen. Return the object, or the person, to the appearance of wholeness that existed before the break. The goal is invisibility of the damage. The ideal is the seamless surface, the undamaged exterior, the life that looks, from the outside, as if nothing went wrong. This approach has a logic to it. Damage signals weakness. Weakness signals vulnerability. And in a world that rewards strength and punishes vulnerability, hiding the damage seems like the only rational strategy. But Kintsugi says something radically different. It says, the break is part of the object's story. The repair is part of its history. And a history, honestly expressed, not hidden or disguised, is not a diminishment of value. It is the source of a specific kind of value that an unbroken object can never possess. The golden bowl has something the unbroken bowl does not have. It has evidence of having survived, of having been broken and made whole again, of carrying its experience visibly, without shame, as a feature rather than a flaw. And here is the philosophical core that most people miss when they first encounter Kintsugi. The gold is not a metaphor for pretending the break was good. The break may have been terrible. The damage may have been real and serious and deeply painful. The gold is a statement about what is done with the break afterward. It is the choice, deliberate, creative, courageous, to integrate the damage into the thing rather than erase it. To say, this happened. It is part of what this is now. And this is more interesting, more real, more alive, precisely because it carries this history. This is not toxic positivity. It is not the instruction to be grateful for your trauma or to pretend that difficult things were secretly blessings. It is a philosophy of honest integration, of building a wholeness that includes, rather than denies, the breaks that have occurred. Chapter 2. The man who was repaired with the wrong material. There was a ceramics teacher in Kyoto named Daisuke Mori, who spent 40 years teaching traditional Japanese pottery. He told his students a story at the beginning of every new year that I want to tell you now. A student came to him once, a young man in his late 20s, carrying a piece he had made and broken, and then repaired himself before the teacher could see it. He had used regular glue, colorless, the kind designed to make the repair invisible. From a distance, the bowl looked intact. Daisuke held it up to the light. He could see the cracks. Not perfectly. The repair was competent, but faintly. The lines of damage were still there beneath the surface, imperfectly concealed, visible to anyone who looked closely enough. He handed it back and said, "You have hidden the break from the casual observer, but you have not healed it. The crack is still there. It is simply no longer honest about being there." The student asked, "Is that not better? Is it not better to hide it?" Daisuke said, "It is easier. It is not better." The bowl that hides its damage is fragile in a specific way that the bowl repaired with gold is not. Because the bowl repaired with gold knows exactly where it broke, and the gold holds those specific points with more care, more deliberate attention than any other part of the surface. The hidden break has no such care. It has only concealment. He told his students, "The man who hides his breaks is like this bowl, functional from a distance, fragile at exactly the points where the damage occurred, because he has covered the breaks but not addressed them, and the world, like the light, eventually finds them anyway." This story is not about pottery, and the man who is honest with himself knows exactly what it is about. Chapter 3. Why men hide their breaks. Before we talk about the Kintsugi practice for a man's life, we need to be honest about why so many men never apply it. Why the instinct, almost universally, is toward concealment rather than integration. The answer is not complicated, but it is worth naming precisely because vague understanding produces vague change. Men hide their breaks for 3 specific reasons. The first reason is shame. The culture that most men grew up in, regardless of geography, regardless of background, has some version of the same message about male damage. That it is weakness, that strong men do not break, that the cracks in a man are evidence of insufficiency rather than history. This message is so deeply embedded that most men do not experience it as an external judgment. They experience it as an internal truth. The shame is not something someone else imposed from outside. It has become the voice inside, the one that says, if they knew what broke you, they would think less of you. If they saw the cracks, they would not respect the bowl. The second reason is fear of reopening. Many men have performed enough repair in the conventional sense that the breaks no longer actively hurt. They have built scar tissue. They function. And the prospect of looking at the break deliberately, of examining it with the kind of honest attention that Kintsugi demands, feels like the risk of undoing the functional closure that took so long to build. This fear is understandable. It is also, in most cases, exactly backwards. The break that has been covered without being examined does not remain closed. It remains active, invisibly, underground, shaping behavior and choices and relationships in ways that the man cannot see because he has deliberately stopped looking. The third reason is the absence of a framework. Most men who are willing to look at their damage honestly do not know what to do with what they find. The Western framework, therapy, processing, healing, is available, but does not resonate with how many men are built. It asks for a quality of emotional excavation and verbal expression that many men find genuinely difficult, not because they are broken in an additional way, but because they are differently constructed. Kintsugi offers a different framework, not excavation, integration, not talking about the break until it is exhausted, deciding what to do with it, what to make it part of, how to carry it forward as a visible, honest, even beautiful part of the whole. This framework, practical, concrete, forward-facing, is what we are building today. Right here. Drop the word gold in the comments if you have a break, a failure, a loss, a version of yourself that did not survive, that you have been hiding rather than integrating. Not a big confession, not the details, just the word gold. Because naming the existence of the break is the first act of the Kintsugi practice. Chapter 4. The history of Kintsugi and what it reveals. Let us go deeper into the history, because the context in which Kintsugi developed is not incidental to its meaning. Japan in the 15th and 16th centuries was a society that had developed, through centuries of Zen Buddhist influence, a specific philosophical relationship with imperfection, transience, and the beauty of things that carry visible age and history. This relationship was expressed through a concept called Wabi-Sabi. Wabi meaning the beauty found in simplicity and the asymmetrical. Sabi meaning the beauty that comes from age and the passage of time. Together, the aesthetic philosophy that finds value in things that are incomplete, impermanent, and imperfect. This is the soil in which Kintsugi grew, a culture that had already decided, philosophically, aesthetically, spiritually, that the unmarked surface was not the highest form of beauty, that the bowl weathered by use, the garden that shows the work of seasons, the face that carries the lines of a life fully lived, these things have a beauty that the perfect, unmarked, unweathered surface cannot touch. Kintsugi is wabi-sabi applied to breakage, the specific expression of this philosophy in the context of things that have been damaged and repaired. And what makes it philosophically unique, distinct from other repair philosophies in other cultures, is this insistence that the repair be not just honest, but beautiful. Not merely functional, not merely visible, beautiful. The gold is not there to say, this broke and we fixed it. The gold is there to say, this broke. The breaking is part of its story, and the story makes it more, not less, worthy of attention, care, and value. Now, apply this to a man. The marriage that ended, the health that collapsed, the career that did not survive the risk taken, the relationship with the father that broke in a way that was never properly repaired, the version of himself he had to let die in order to survive. These breaks are not evidence of a lesser man. According to Kintsugi, according to the philosophy that an entire sophisticated culture built around the beauty of what has been broken and repaired, they are the specific marks that make a man's life uniquely his, unmistakably his, carrying a depth and a complexity and a specific kind of weight that the unbroken life can never possess. The unbroken life is the unbroken bowl, admirable, but ordinary. The man who has been broken and has done something real with the breaking, who has filled the cracks with gold rather than hiding them in shame or being destroyed by them permanently, is the bowl that people stop to look at, not because they pity it, because it carries something that commands attention. Chapter 5. What the research says about broken men. Let us bring science to this, because the philosophy is powerful, and the science confirms it with a precision that should matter to every man who thinks of his damage as weakness. In 1996, psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun published a framework called post-traumatic growth, not post-traumatic stress, which most people know. Post-traumatic growth. Their research documented something that had been observed anecdotally for centuries, but had never been rigorously studied. That a significant proportion of people who experience serious trauma, loss, failure, breakdown, the shattering of fundamental assumptions about their life, do not simply return to their previous level of functioning after recovery. They exceed it, not in every case, not automatically, not without the specific kind of processing and integration that we are talking about today, but in a documented, reproducible, significant portion of cases. The people who go through the fire and come out the other side do not come out diminished. They come out with qualities they did not possess before the fire. Tedeschi and Calhoun identified 5 specific areas where this growth most commonly occurs. Personal strength. The man who has survived something genuinely hard discovers a capacity in himself that he did not know was there. Not because the discovery was pleasant, because the break demanded it. New possibilities. The collapse of one version of a man's life, his career, his relationship, his identity, creates space that was not there before. And that space, though terrifying initially, is where genuine new direction most commonly emerges. Relating to others. The man who has suffered genuinely becomes more capable of genuine connection, not in spite of his breaks, because of them. The specific quality of being understood, of having someone truly see you, is only available from a man who has been seen in his own darkness and survived it. Appreciation of life. The man who has lost something real appreciates what remains with a specificity and depth that the man who has lost nothing cannot access. Not as a consolation, as a genuine enrichment of how the remaining life is experienced. Spiritual or philosophical depth. The man who has been broken and done the work of genuine integration rather than concealment develops a quality of thinking about existence, meaning, and what matters that does not come from comfort. These are not soft observations. They are documented, replicated, peer-reviewed findings about what happens to human beings who go through genuine difficulty and integrate it honestly. This is the neuroscience of Kintsugi, the scientific confirmation of what Japanese craftsmen expressed through gold in the 15th century. The break, properly integrated, produces something that the unbroken surface never could. Chapter 6. The 3 breaks that define most men. Let us now get specific. Because the enemy of growth is always vagueness. Most men's lives contain 3 categories of break, not always all 3. But most men, if they are honest, can identify at least one, and many can identify all 3. The first break, the identity collapse. The first category is the break that comes when the identity a man has built, the version of himself he has invested in, defined himself by, structured his life around, is destroyed by circumstances he did not choose and could not control. The man who defined himself as a provider and lost everything in a business collapse. The man who defined himself as a husband and found himself divorced. The man who defined himself as healthy and received a diagnosis. The man who defined himself by his physical capability and was injured. These breaks are particularly devastating because they do not just change the circumstances. They destroy the framework through which the man understood himself. The story of who he was no longer holds, and in the gap left by that collapsed story, Many men experience the specific disorientation of not knowing who they are without the thing that broke. Kintsugi says this about the identity collapse. The framework that broke was not you. It was a container you were using. And the break, though it feels like self-destruction, is often the necessary demolition of a container that had become too small for who you were meant to become. The gold does not restore the old container. It builds a new one that includes the marks of the breaking as evidence of the journey from the old shape to the new. The second break, the failure of effort. The second category is the break that comes when a man gives everything, genuinely, fully, without holding back, to something that fails anyway. This break is different from the first. The first can sometimes be attributed to external forces. The second cannot. This one happened on the man's watch, with his full investment. In the thing he chose and committed to. The business he built for 3 years and lost. The relationship he worked harder to save than he had ever worked for anything, and watched end anyway. The creative project that absorbed his best years and went nowhere. These breaks produce a specific kind of damage that is different from all others, because they attack not just the outcome, but the belief that effort is meaningful, that commitment is worth it, that the man who gives everything can expect something real in return. When that belief breaks, and it breaks in most men who try hard enough for long enough, something fundamental shifts in how they approach the next attempt, the next investment, the next time they have to decide whether to go all in or hold something back. Kintsugi says this: the failure of your full effort does not mean effort is meaningless. It means the specific direction that effort was pointed in was not the right one. And the break reveals, if you are willing to examine the gold rather than bury the crack, exactly what the right direction might be. The physical goal he trained for and could not achieve. These breaks produce a specific kind of damage that is different from all others, because they attack not just the outcome, but the belief that effort is meaningful, that commitment is worth it, that the man who gives everything can expect something real in return. When that belief breaks, and it breaks in most men who try hard enough for long enough, something fundamental shifts in how they approach the next attempt, the next investment, the next time they have to decide whether to go all in or hold something back. Kintsugi says this: the failure of your full effort does not mean effort is meaningless. It means the specific direction that effort was pointed in was not the right one. And the break reveals, if you are willing to examine the gold rather than bury the crack, exactly what the right direction might be. The man who gave everything to the wrong container learned something about containers that the man who never fully committed cannot know. And that knowledge, honestly held, honestly applied, is worth something that only comes from having genuinely failed. The third break, the loss that does not heal. The third category is the one most men find hardest to speak about. The loss that did not heal in the conventional sense. The grief that did not complete itself and move on. The absence that became a permanent feature of the interior landscape. The father who died before the relationship was repaired. The child who was lost. The friendship that ended in a way that left questions that can never be answered. The version of the future that was taken by something, illness, accident, decision, circumstance, that no amount of acceptance has completely resolved. These breaks are different from the others because they do not have the option of repair in the conventional sense. There is no restoration possible. The thing that was lost is gone, permanently. And the gap it left is real and does not close. Kintsugi does not pretend otherwise. It does not say, look for the lesson, find the growth, discover how this made you stronger. What it says is this: carry it visibly. Do not pretend it is not there. Do not build your life around hiding the absence. Allow the loss to be a visible part of what you are, not as an open wound that demands the world's attention, but as an honest feature of a man who has loved something real enough to be genuinely broken by its loss. The man who carries his grief visibly, not dramatically, not destructively, but honestly, is a man who can be trusted with what matters. Because everyone who looks at him knows he is someone who has had something that mattered and lost it and continued anyway. That continuity, the continuing in spite of, the living forward through the break, is the gold. It is not the absence of pain. It is the evidence of a man who met the pain honestly and kept moving. Stop here. I want you to type in the comments which of the 3 breaks has most shaped who you are right now. Type identity, effort, or loss. Just one word. No explanation needed. Because the man who can name his specific break has already begun the work of filling it with gold. Chapter 7. The Kintsugi Practice for a Man's Life. Now we arrive at the practice. The specific, concrete, actionable framework for applying the philosophy of Kintsugi to the actual breaks in your actual life. 4 stages. Not a linear process necessarily. This is not the kind of work that moves in a straight line, but a framework that provides direction for the man who is ready to do something real with what broke him. Stage 1. The honest inventory. The first stage is the one most men skip, not from laziness, from the specific discomfort of looking directly at the breaks rather than around them. You sit, alone, with paper, without distraction, and you write an honest inventory of the breaks. Not a therapeutic excavation, a practical accounting. What broke? When? What was lost in the breaking? What did that break cost? Not just practically, but in terms of how you moved through the world afterward. You are not looking for emotions necessarily. You are looking for facts. The specific, honest, unembellished facts of what happened and what it cost. Most men who do this for the first time discover something they did not expect. The breaks they have been managing most carefully are often not the largest ones on the list. The break they have been living around, the one that has shaped their choices most profoundly, is often something they have barely acknowledged as a break at all, because acknowledging it fully felt too expensive. Write the inventory, all of it, without editing, without the version you tell other people or the version you tell yourself in the daylight. The honest version. This is the first act of Kintsugi, seeing the break clearly enough to know where to apply the gold. Stage 2. The meaning question. The second stage is the most philosophically demanding, and it is the one that separates Kintsugi from simple self-acceptance or therapeutic processing. For each break in the inventory, you ask one question: what did this break make possible that would not have been possible without it? Not, was this break secretly good? Not, what lesson can I extract to make this palatable? What did it make possible? This question demands honesty in both directions. Some breaks genuinely open doors that would not otherwise have existed. The collapsed business that revealed the man's actual calling. The ended relationship that forced a reckoning with who he actually was. The illness that reorganized his priorities in a way that nothing else could have. And some breaks simply cost. They do not have a redemptive reversal. The loss that was simply a loss. The failure that was simply a failure. For these, the question does not produce a clean answer, and the Kintsugi practice does not require a clean answer. What it requires is the honest engagement with the question, because the man who asks what a break made possible, even if the answer is nothing obvious, even if the answer is only that it made him someone who has survived this, is a man who is applying gold to the crack rather than hiding it. He is choosing to integrate rather than conceal. Stage 3. The visible carry. The third stage is practical and ongoing. It is the decision, made deliberately and renewed regularly, to carry the breaks honestly rather than hiding them. This does not mean broadcasting your damage to every person you encounter. It does not mean performing vulnerability as a social strategy. It means the specific internal decision that the breaks are part of who you are visible to you, and are not something you are actively working to conceal from yourself or from people who matter. It means when a break is relevant, when it is part of the honest answer to a question someone is asking, or when it is shaping a decision in a way that would be better made with it acknowledged, you let it be there. Visible, part of the picture. The samurai tradition has a concept that aligns with this. Mono no aware, the pathos of things, the specific emotional quality of being fully present with the transience and impermanence of everything, including yourself, including your own history of breaking and repair. The man who practices mono no aware does not fight the breaks. He holds them with a quality of attention that is simultaneously sad and accepting and even grateful, as part of the specific, irreplaceable texture of a life that is genuinely his. Stage 4. The active making. The fourth stage is where Kintsugi becomes most fully itself, not just the acceptance of the break, the active making of something from it. The craftsman did not simply accept the crack in the bowl. He poured gold into it. He made something, and the making required skill, attention, deliberate care, the active investment of something valuable in the specific place where the break occurred. For a man, this means asking, what can I build, specifically deliberately with real craft and real investment, from the specific material of this break? This is not always obvious. Sometimes it takes months of the inventory and meaning questions before this stage becomes clear. But it always becomes clear for the man who is genuinely working through the previous stages. The man whose marriage broke might build a quality of presence with his children that would not have been possible in the undivided life. The man whose business collapsed might build a second venture with a clarity of values that was not possible before he discovered, expensively, what he did not value. The man whose health broke might build a relationship with his own body, its needs, its limits, its specific capacities, that the man who never faced that reckoning does not have. The active making is the gold. It is the choice to invest real time, real attention, real craft in the specific place where the break occurred, not to restore what was, to build what only becomes possible because of what was lost. Chapter 8. The Man Who Found the Gold. Let me tell you about Kenji Takahashi. He was 46 years old when I first encountered his story. A former executive at a construction company in Osaka, who had spent 15 years building a career that was, by any external measure, the definition of success. Then his company went into a scandal that he had nothing to do with, but could not survive professionally. He lost his position. He lost the income. He lost the network that had defined his professional identity for a decade and a half. He lost, and this was the break that went deepest, the version of himself that had existed around all of those things. The confident, capable, respected man who walked into rooms with authority. That man broke when the company broke, and Kenji, for the first time in his adult life, did not know who he was without him. He spent 8 months managing the break in the conventional way. He updated his CV. He networked carefully. He maintained the exterior of a man between positions rather than a man who had been shattered. He was, in Daisuke Mori's terms, the bowl repaired, with invisible glue. Then, he found a book about Kintsugi. Not metaphorical Kintsugi, an actual book about the art form. He bought it because the cover was beautiful. He read it in an evening, and he spent the following 3 days sitting with what it was saying. He wrote in his journal, for the first time in years, probably for the first time properly ever, the honest inventory. The breaks, not just the recent one, the ones he had been carrying and managing for a long time. The father he had never properly known. The marriage that had been functional but empty for years before the professional collapse gave it the final push. The man he had wanted to be at 20, that the man he had become at 46, had entirely forgotten. He spent the better part of a year in stages 2 and 3, asking the meaning questions, choosing to carry the breaks honestly, telling his closest friend, for the first time, the real shape of what had happened, without the managed version. Then he built something, not another corporate career, a consultancy that worked specifically with executives in professional crisis, men who had been broken by exactly the kind of collapse he had been through, men who needed not a career coach, but someone who had actually been in the specific darkness they were in. He was, as he described it to a journalist later, the bowl repaired with gold. His specific breaks, fully inventoried, honestly carried, actively built into something, had become the precise material of the only thing he could now offer that no unbroken man could offer. The crack was the credential, the gold was the choice. Chapter 9. What Kintsugi builds in a man. Let us be direct about what this practice produces over time. It produces authenticity, not the performed authenticity of the man who shares his vulnerability strategically. The real kind, the specific quality of a man who is not hiding anything important about who he is, not because he broadcasts everything, but because he has nothing to hide from himself. And a man with nothing to hide from himself moves through the world differently, with a specific groundedness that people feel before they can name it. It produces depth. The unbroken surface is smooth. It does not invite close examination. The surface that carries visible history, the lines of repair, the evidence of having been through something and come back. This is the surface that people lean toward, not from pity, from recognition, the recognition that this is a man who has actually lived, who has been tested, who is carrying something real. It produces connection. The men that other people trust most deeply are almost never the men who appear unbroken. They are the men who have been broken and have done something honest with the breaking. Because the man who has been in the darkness and come back can be present with another man's darkness in a way that the unbroken man cannot. He knows the territory. He has been there. And that knowing is the specific currency of the deepest human connection available. It produces freedom. The man who has hidden his breaks has tied an enormous amount of energy to the maintenance of concealment, the management of the distance between how he appears and what he actually carries. Kintsugi dissolves that distance. And what is released when that management stops, the energy, the clarity, the specific lightness of a man who is no longer performing wholeness he does not feel, is something that has to be experienced to be fully understood. It produces legacy. The man who has integrated his breaks honestly, who has built something real from the specific material of what broke him, leaves behind something that the unbroken man cannot. The evidence of having been genuinely tested and having built from the testing. The specific mark of a man whose life was not smooth, but was real, honest, worth examining closely. That is the legacy of Kintsugi. Not a smooth surface, a golden one. Closing. The final words. We return now to where we began. Look at your hands. The marks on them are not the evidence of a man who failed to remain undamaged. They are the evidence of a man who has actually lived, who has held things, who has lost things, who has been broken and has kept moving. The question that Kintsugi asks, the only question that matters, is not whether you have breaks. You have breaks. Every man who has been alive long enough has breaks. The question is what you are going to do with them. Are you going to continue the concealment? The invisible glue repair that leaves the crack hidden but present, fragile at exactly the points it was damaged, vulnerable to any light that examines it closely enough? Or are you going to do something harder and more honest and, in the end, more beautiful? Are you going to pour gold into the cracks? Not because the cracks were secretly gifts, not because everything happens for a reason and the breaking was part of a plan, but because you are a craftsman of your own life, and craftsmen do not leave their best material unworked. The break happened. The damage was real. The cost was real. Nothing about Kintsugi requires you to pretend otherwise, but you are still here, still holding the bowl, and the gold is available to you. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Now. The Japanese craftsman did not wait until the bowl stopped hurting to be broken. He worked with the break immediately, directly, with skill and patience and the deliberate investment of something precious into the specific place where the damage occurred. That is the practice. That is the philosophy. That is the way of the man whose life carries visible history and is more valuable, not less, for carrying it. Your scars are not your weakness. They are the map of everything you survived. Pour the gold, walk it,